Hello, and welcome to our build guide where we explore the nuances of the new Sacrifice Support gem. The newly introduced Sacrifice Support causes you to lose 25% of your current life every time you cast a spell, but the big portion of lost life will be added to your spell as chaos damage. The list of spells that synergize with this support is rather short. The best candidate for that is the HEXBLAST spell. The HEXBLAST allows chaos damage to inflict elemental ailments, and is resisted by the lowest of the enemy resistances. It deals insanely high but slow hits, which makes it very easy to apply freeze and shock on your enemies. It also has a very high effectiveness of added damage, which works very well with the Sacrifice Support. With the dissolution of the Flesh Jewel, you can obtain very high amounts of maximum life, and its unique mechanic changes the way your life works. When you take damage, you will reserve your life for the same amount instead of losing it. If you stop taking damage for at least 2 seconds, all reservation is undone. This allows you to freely sacrifice all your life without any worries about dying. With the Eternal Youth Keystone, you will constantly recharge 1/3 of your maximum life per second. It is important for the Sacrifice Support, as its bonus depends on your current life, not the maximum limit. To deal area of effect damage with this spell, you have to target a hexed enemy. You can use the Profane Proxy Ring to make your skitterbots apply a curse of your choice to all enemies in their radius, or use the Blasphemy support to turn your hex into aura. After every hit the hex is removed, so you need an automatic application for smooth gameplay. You will have a very high amount of life, but you cannot survive sustained damage for too long. The Petrified Blood is especially powerful in this setup, as it reduces the damage taken by 40%, and its damage over time effect is negated by the life reservation mechanic. The clear speed is decent, you will one-tap most monster packs and move quickly with the shield charge. Damage against bosses is very high. Freezing and shocking with big hits is also very satisfying. The baseline version can be assembled with around 10 divine budget. You get a lot of damage just from stacking maximum life. The build relies on particular unique items to properly function. We wouldn't recommend starting a new league with this setup, as some of those items simply may not even exist on the market for the first few days. However, their prices drop quickly, so it is a great choice for a second character. The Wrathpith Globe grants you tons of critical strike chance and spell damage, as you stack a lot of maximum life. Unfortunately, the sacrifice from this shield does not count towards extra damage from the Sacrifice Support. It also grants you a decent amount of spell block chance. The Profane Proxy Ring automates the hex application with your skitterbots. It is more beneficial to disable the shocking skitterbot, as you will inflict much more powerful shocks by yourself. It is important to have high quality on your skitterbots as it increases their movement speed. Dissolution of the Flesh causes you to reserve your life instead of losing it upon taking damage, and you need to avoid taking damage for 2 seconds to unreserve it all. It greatly improves your maximum life and allows you to freely sacrifice it with your spells. Divinarius is the best weapon for this build. It grants you tons of damage against single target enemies, and caps your critical strike chance against enemies you wouldn't bother to mark. It also improves your area of effect, which is very useful for better clear speed. The Zealotry aura modifiers from the Watcher's Eye Jewel provide a decent bonus to your damage. You can also fit in a level 1 Vitality or Precision aura to benefit from the special modifiers here. Having the Life Leech modifier here would free up your gloves implicit, which can automate your cold exposure application. You will need high maximum life modifiers on every rare gear piece you wear. It is not an attribute stacking build, but strength grants you flat maximum life and a bit of damage, so it is also worth having everywhere you can. In terms of damage, you should look for cast speed, critical strike multiplier, chaos or spell damage bonuses, or additional gem levels for HEXBLAST. If you are limited by your budget, use a wand that grants you lots of spell damage, critical strike chance and multiplier, cast speed, and gem levels. You can also craft double damage chance there. A perfect rare would grant more damage than Divinarius, but you would lose out on the area of effect bonus. Your body armor should have the Hunter influence, so it can grant you additional spell critical strike chance and improve your maximum life by up to 12%. It should also grant you high amounts of maximum life. Depending on your budget, you should then look for additional resistances, physical damage mitigation, or additional curse limit. On your helmet, it is important to obtain high quantities of mana reservation efficiency. Other than that, look for high bonuses to maximum life, strength, or resistances. You can also craft a special modifier that converts part of the incoming physical damage to be taken as elemental. Your boots should provide you with high movement speed, maximum life, and a chance to avoid being poisoned, which you can obtain from Eldritch Implicits. It can also provide immunity against freeze and lacking attributes or resistances. On gloves, look mostly for maximum life, resistances, attributes, and an empty prefix so you can craft additional damage modifiers. Eldritch Implicits are also useful here, as they can provide you with a chance to unnerve enemies, apply exposure, or grant you life leech. A proper belt can grant you tons of maximum life through the flat and percentage modifiers. It should also grant you lacking resistances and attributes. Use a Stygian Vice base so you can socket in additional Abyss Jewel. Certain flask modifiers will make your flask sustain noticeably better. In your Stygian Vice belt you can socket additional Abyss Jewel, which should have a high maximum life bonus and a Corrupted Implicits that grants you immunity against corrupting blood. It can also improve your cast speed or provide resistances and attributes. On a rare ring you should look for modifiers to maximum life, increased cast speed, critical strike multiplier, and lacking resistances and attributes. You can also craft additional minimum frenzy or endurance charges. The vermilion ring has the best implicit, but the coral ring with a good fracture is more cost-effective. Here you should look for maximum life, cast speed, critical strike multiplier, and additional levels for your gems. It can also provide a bit of resistances or attributes. You should anoint it with the Whispers of Doom, notable for the additional curse. On your jewels you should look for maximum life, critical strike multiplier, and cast speed or lacking resistances and attributes. You can also reduce the poison duration or improve mana reservation efficiency. Here you can look for generic chaos damage bonuses. Use a large cluster jewel with 8 passive skills to save your passive points. The Unwaveringly Evil Notable is especially useful, as it prevents stuns from interrupting your casts. Medium cluster jewels can greatly improve your critical strike chance and the damage you deal. The Quick Getaway also improves your movement speed, which is a rare modifier to find outside your boots. The 4 and 5 additional passive versions use the same amount of your passive skill points. The Bottled Faith is the best unique flask used for offense. It greatly improves your critical strike chance and damage against enemies standing in the large consecrated ground it creates upon use. You can use the Witchfire Brew Flask to enhance your map-clearing gameplay. Reducing chaos resistances is also useful, and you can have a reliable source of curse on enemies. For pure single-target damage, reducing elemental resistances is better. For the remaining magic flasks we recommend using Quartz Flask with Bleeding Removal, Quicksilver Flask with Cast Speed Bonus, Jade Flask with Evasion Rating Bonus, and a Silver or Diamond Flask with increased critical strike chance bonus. The HEXBLAST is your main source of damage. You should use it on a hexed enemy to greatly improve the damage and area of effect. It can inflict elemental ailments and is resisted by the lowest enemy's resistance. You can use Awakened Void Manipulation to raise the level of HEXBLAST, or the Divergent quality to gain life leech. The Sacrifice support also has useful Divergent quality, which causes it to sacrifice more life, which grants more damage in return. Petrified Blood reduces incoming damage by 40%, and thanks to the dissolution of the flesh you can ignore its damage over time effect. It also keeps you at a low life status for the purpose of Pain Attunement Keystone. Zealotry improves your spell damage and critical strike chance. It also creates consecrated ground occasionally when you land a critical strike on enemy. This aura causes you to summon 2 skitterbots that apply shock and chill on nearby enemies. With the Profane Proxy unique ring, it will apply a curse instead of the chosen ailment. Tempest Shield grants you a solid amount of spell block chance and makes you immune to shock. With enough mana reservation efficiency on your items, you don't have to use an Enlightened support setup for this aura. The most mana-consuming auras should be linked with the Enlightened to reduce their reservation. If you lack this support, get a helmet with an enchant that lowers the reservation of a specific aura. Elemental Weakness lowers all elemental resistances of affected foes. HEXBLAST removes the curse with the lowest duration, so it should prioritize the Frostbite instead. Frost Bomb applies cold exposure which lowers the enemy cold resistance. It also lowers their life regeneration. If you use Glove Implicit for cold exposure you can skip this skill. Arcanist Brand is a brand skill that casts all linked spells in rapid succession. Use it to automate 2 spells into one button press. The life tap support is necessary to sustain mana costs. If you have cold exposure on your gloves you can skip the brand and just cast Elemental Weakness manually. Assassin's Mark greatly improves your critical strikes and generates power charges for you. Marks don't interact with HEXBLAST, so you don't have to worry about reapplying it. By linking it with Mark on hit you can apply it with Shield Charge and any gloves enchant that triggers an attack. You can also cast it manually for greater effectiveness. Shield Charge is your main movement skill. It is a quick charge toward the targeted location, it has no cooldown, and scales with your attack and movement speed. Use the additional accuracy if you have your Assassin Mark automated, otherwise it is unnecessary. Faster attacks is always useful as it greatly improves your mobility. Flame Dash is your second movement skill. It is a quick teleport that can be used to cross terrain gaps or move around a bit faster. Withering Steps grants you phasing and inflicts withering stacks on nearby foes. Using any other skill stops the effect. Use the low-level Arcane Surge support to gain this buff every time you use your utility. It grants you a bit of cast speed and mana regen. Frostbite lowers the cold resistance of affected foes. It should be socketed in your ring so it will be automatically applied to nearby enemies. You can also use the Blasphemy setup instead if you don't want to rely on the Skitterbot AI. Steelskin absorbs a part of the incoming damage and disables bleeding on you. It is very important to have any bleeding removal in this build, as it stops the dissolution of the flesh from unreserving your life. In the second act of the campaign, you should help Aramir and kill all the bandits to obtain 2 additional passive tree skill points. Damage over time effects are the most dangerous to us, so as your major Pantheon power you should pick the Soul of Arakali. It reduces all types of damage over time you take and reduces the duration of debuffs on you. As for the minor Pantheon power you should pick and upgrade the Soul of Abarath. It significantly lowers the duration of ignites on you, and makes you immune to the Burning Ground, which would often disable your recovery otherwise. You can level up as a generic spellcaster witch. You don't have to use chaos spells or sacrifice support straight away. Cold spells like Freezing Pulse seem to work out the best, as the Occultist's Notable lowers both the chaos and cold resistance of nearby enemies. HEXBLAST is also a viable choice, but you will need level 28 to start using it. The sacrifice support is a bit deceiving as it uses your current life, so it is impossible to get the full benefit of it with every cast, but it is still better than any other support gem in this setup. Waiting for the full live recovery before each cast is simply not worth the wait. You will recover roughly half of your maximum life per second, which is enough for clearing packs of monsters. The Petrified Blood limits how much life you can potentially sacrifice, but the Pain Attunement Keystone and the sheer amount of damage mitigation you gain from this aura make it justifiable. The passive tree focuses on maximum life, critical strikes, and mana reservation efficiency. Your maximum life affects your survivability, amount of added damage, increased spell damage, and critical strike chance, so it is your #1 priority. Your Ascendancy makes your curses more reliable, and automatically applies withered stacks on nearby enemies. That concludes today's guide. We encourage you to try it out yourself. If you liked the video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. As always, have a good day and see you next time.